Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. Welcome to another episode. If you missed last week's episode, it was an interview of David Stark of David Stark Design, an incredible designer producer out of New York City who works all over the world. And we got into an amazing conversation, including his view on building business structure and pushing boundaries with design. And my co-host on The Next Level, to break down the highlights of that interview, was Cindy Novotny of Master Connection Associates. So be sure to check out both episodes. They were really inspiring and educational. Today's guest is Sylvia Weinstock. One of my first interviews. We met when we were both on the bride's dream team producing a fantasy wedding at the Castle of Disney World years ago. I produced the music and entertainment with my company, Kushner Entertainment, and Sylvia designed a stunning wedding cake. And we immediately began with a very special relationship. So I've known her a long time. Sylvia is one of the great event industry entrepreneurs and a true innovator. Those of you who have seen her speak or know her personally know how special she is. She began her business in the middle of her life at age 50 and was in business for 36 years. She closed down her business a few years ago, though is still dealing with licensing her brand all over the world, and she gives details about that. Sylvia is a straight shooter and tells it like it is, and she has a fascinating personal story and story about the trajectory of her career. There's so much to learn from her and be inspired by. And know that toward the end of the conversation, we talked about her husband, Ben, who was having health issues at the time, and he has since passed away. And Sylvia was very open about how she viewed those challenges with him at the time. Sylvia and I also talked a lot about not just her business and career, but about life in general and her perspective on it, which is beautiful. And she gives a tip with dealing with it, especially in these troubling times. And at the very end, we joked about her inviting me to dinner at her apartment in Tribeca. And if only I had a microphone on, because she did end up inviting me later to a dinner that she cooked for me at her apartment. It was just a few months ago, and it was so special, such a wonderful memory for me. I really love her. Don't forget also to listen to our follow-on segment today, as we have with each interview, The Next Level, in which my co-host, and today it's Sean Lowe of The Business of Being Creative. We're very lucky. And so Sean and I tease out some of the highlights in the interview and discuss them and how you can use them to help raise your business to the next level and just enjoy life more. So enjoy my conversation with Sylvia Weinstock. You know, I just want to take a moment and say, wouldn't we all like to have more exposure in our markets? I mean, certainly our own handling of social media and various other tools are ways that we do gain more presence. Though, what if you could have professional outside help that you could depend on to really get you the results that you need? And I know we all are happy to get much more presence. Well, I want to tell you about our sponsor of today, OFD Consulting. They are an award-winning publicity agency that focuses on the wedding industry, and their client portfolio ranges from top-tier planners and venues to well-regarded national brands and industry thought leaders. And OFD Consulting has placed clients in a slew of popular online and offline publications, including the New York Times, Martha Stewart Weddings, Style Me Pretty, many others. And they also have a service that's dedicated entirely to B2B press for those looking to elevate their brand reputation among peers through online mentions, guest articles, podcasts, and speaking engagements. So if you are a small business and you want to get your name out there, get more exposure for your brand, get your message out there, and you want to just like dip your toes in the PR waters, check out the OFD Collective, which is a 3-star membership with robust educational and coaching opportunities, along with ongoing press leads. So definitely check out ofdconsulting.com. Again, that's ofdconsulting.com. God, it might have been 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It was a brides magazine thing. We were both on the dream team down in Orlando. Remember the whole Disney thing?
Vaguely.
Outside. How dare you vaguely?
Vaguely, because, after time, everything gets jumbled into one big thing.
Yeah.
There's so many events that one goes to. You tend to forget it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you forget the people.
What? Hey, wait a minute. Not me. Certainly
I
you remember
sometimes.
me. Sometimes. Okay. Well, I remember when I first met you, eventually I came here to the offices in New York City, and I was able to get a tasting and everything and really got to see, we went to each floor and I got to see exactly everything that you were doing. I was so blown away by the intricacy of it and started to hear some of your stories. So at this point, I know you're going through some really major changes lately. You know, you've closed down the office, but you're also doing a lot of licensing. And so before I came, even though I know you, I wanted to go back and just look at what I could find on the net. And I know some of this, but I mean, your client list, I mean, Oprah, Robert De Niro, Martha Stewart, Ralph Lauren, Michael Douglas, Jennifer Lopez, the Kennedys, the Rockefellers, the Clintons. You've got clientele all over the world. I mean, Milan, Paris, Dubai, London. And I know that just a few years ago, you launched your licensing and that you're teaching your techniques to create what you've, at least as close as you can here, with partnerships in Japan and Kuwait. And I mean, this is after what, 30 something years?
Yeah, about 36, 37. I think we came into New York in 1980.
Yeah.
But I had baked a couple of years before on Long Island where we lived. So I would say the business really started in 1980, which makes it about 37 years old.
What was it that you did before? You were teaching, weren't you?
Well, I started out as a kindergarten teacher and then got a master's degree in school psychology. So between the two degrees, you know, it's really tools in life, because you can use them for everything. So we lived on Long Island. My husband was a lawyer, and we raised our 3 daughters. And I cooked and baked and entertained and took courses and expanded what I thought would be a cultured woman. And so after the last kid left the house, we decided, well, who needs 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms and all the stuff we owned? And we decided to change our lifestyle. In 1980, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I think that was the real impetus to change life, because I was going into chemotherapy in New York several times a week, and then said, well, the house is too big. We're on Long Island. I'm tired of law. Let's go into the city and see what we could do.
You were talking about teaching and how it taught you a lot of things that you applied then to your business. What are you referring to specifically? Like, what about the teaching?
Well, you learn to have patience.
How old were the kids that you were teaching?
Kindergarten and 2nd grade.
Oh, yeah, we're talking patience.
You have to have patience. You have to put yourself in the child's mind in a sense that they're sensitive. They want to be loved. They want to be accepted. And I find that adults are in the same boat. So whatever I learned and acquired as a school teacher, you carry those skills for the rest of your life. Because I meet people today, some of my brides, who are also feeling very insecure and very sensitive and want full attention. And you've seen that. And you've also seen children who want it yesterday. And we have people in this world today who want whatever they want. And they want it immediately.
And also, you were saying about brides and being insecure. I mean, my experience dealing with brides too, and of course there's all kinds, but it's such an emotional event for them. And then they've got, my God, the mishigas with the family sometimes, right? The issues with, it brings up so many issues as wonderful. And, it's the film fulfillment perhaps of some kind of a dream for both the bride and groom, but it does get them to be very vulnerable, doesn't it?
I think what's happened though is that this whole bridal industry has sold a bill of fantasy goods to the public. And so when a little girl goes to Disneyland, she wears a little tutu and a crown, and all of a sudden she's the princess.
Yeah.
And she carries that image with her for the rest of her life, and her mother does too.
Yes.
So the mothers are frequently more involved than the brides.
Yeah.
And for some of these mothers, it is their wedding. And some of the brides have said to the mother, hey, Mom, this is my wedding.
Yeah.
And the mother frequently will either sit back and say, you're right, or she might be aggressive and say, but I'm paying for it.
There was a mother, one in particular, I'd met with the mother and the daughter, and not even the fiance. And, they were kind of fighting in front of me. And then later the mother called me, and because, my style, like yours, I want to get into that too. We had talked about really getting to know the client and personally connecting. And so the mother had called me. We were on the phone and she was saying how, I'm just really having such a hard time. My daughter's so upset with me. And I felt like she was reaching out to me. And so, of course, I always want to be careful. I don't know about your style, but I ended up saying to the mother, your daughter, the way she talks about it, it's such a dream for her, and she's got her own kind of vision and dreams about it. I would suggest, what if you were to maybe just ask her what she would really like? Now, this sounds basic, but the mother ended up actually, for some reason, she didn't even think of it that way, right? As you know, and she ended up having a conversation with her later. She told me later, she called me to thank me like I'm a therapist, when all I did was basically say, listen to your daughter,
Well, you say back off. It is her event, and she may have some opinions. She's gone to weddings herself. The daughter, she has friends who gets married,
and she's been dreaming about it.
And she knows what she likes and what she doesn't like. So, she may have some strong opinions as well. So I think they have to sit down and talk of that.
So I want to come back in terms of your story along the way. So you were teaching, you said you had breast cancer. I mean, my God.
That was the impetus to say that we wanted to change our life, because I didn't know how many years I would have. I had friends who never made it out of breast cancer and died. So you say to yourself, well, life is very precious now. I've been given a warning. What do I want to do with whatever's left in my life? So we decided to come to New York, and Ben was going to become a real estate tycoon, which never really happened.
What, you and Ben together, or?
Well, we were both in the city. We had an apartment, and he thought as a lawyer that he would be able to figure out a way to make a lot of money. Well, it didn't happen. So we didn't have enough money to go buy a building or two, and we weren't sophisticated enough about the ins and outs of how one can go about doing that with borrowed money.
Yeah.
So there are ways of doing it, and I've learned that since. But, you cannot live a life of could've, should've. And when you start to think of all the things and opportunities you might have taken at some point in your life, or a different road that you might have taken, you can't live in the negative. You have to live in the present and dream for the future.
So obviously, finding out you had breast cancer and obviously beating it, but thinking it could recur? Is that
no, it never occurred to me. I just, for whatever reason, I'm an optimist. And I just felt that we're going to come to the city and we'll figure it out. And I started baking.
Did you always have an interest in that?
Well, if you backtrack a little bit, we had a house in the country, near Hunter Mountain, where my family skied. Ben and the 3 girls would ski, and I didn't ski. I didn't like it. So I stayed back in the house that we had there, and I cooked and I baked more than the girls would eat. So whenever we went to a local restaurant, I would tell them, you don't have a decent dessert. So one Italian restaurant, we became very friendly with them. He said, well, if you're such a baker, bring me some stuff. So I brought him a cheesecake and a chocolate cake and an apple pie, and it was sold out.
Oh, yeah.
So if I have to bake 1 cheesecake, I can bake 4. So I went to all the restaurants in the neighborhood, and I started baking for them every weekend. And at that time, substitute teachers were making about $40 a day. And I would go up and bake and supply the desserts to these restaurants and come home with $500 in cash.
Oh, my God.
So that was the beginning of a career.
This is the end of the 70s, right? Like 79?
No, mid-70s. And I also, through Ben, met some great chefs because they all skied. It was a 2-hour trip out of Manhattan. So we had what we call the French Mafia. So we had Andre Soldner and Jacques Pepin and a few others would go up every weekend and ski, and we would entertain, and they would critique, and they set me up with a retired pastry chef, George Keller, and George and I would bake, and he would critique and give me suggestions and ideas, so that going up every weekend for me was a wonderful thing because I loved doing it, and I'd make a little money. And the kids got to ski and be with their daddy. So in general, I think we started that in about 1969 or so.
Oh, wow.
And we would go up every year, every winter. And then in the summertime, too. It was a country house for us. So that's the real beginning. So when we came into Manhattan in 1980, I already could bake a couple of cakes. And one friend of a young woman who owned a deli in Chelsea, which is now so chic, got married. And I did a little cake for her with beautiful sugar flowers on it. And she put it in the window of her shop. And a chef walked by, wanted to know where that came from. And I got to meet the chef, who was a young woman. And she worked for a big-time caterer at that time, Donald Bruce White, who was the first big-name caterer in town. And he ordered one.
And again, she saw it walking by. We were talking not even yet the taste. You're saying just the look of it. So it's not just that you bake very tasty. From the beginning, you had a visual sense.
I was a craft person. I can knit. I can do needlepoint. I was a kindergarten teacher with finger paint and cutouts. So I had manual dexterity. So for me to go into playing with a sugar base that you can stretch, which we now call gum paste, I call it sugar dough. You could mold something like porcelain flowers and make something that looks realistic. And
back then, cakes were way more basic, right? As far as the look. Didn't you kind of kick this off?
Well, I'll tell you, the basic wedding cakes in particular. No, the French had very good cakes, but they were not wedding cakes. A wedding cake at that time was dry. It had either a fondant or a royal icing on it that you had to crack or cut into. And really, they could be very pretty, but they were not edible. So the object was to make a delicious cake with the finest grade of chocolate and the best grade of butter and fresh fruit, and to use a buttercream icing instead of those hard icing, buttercream, which you can then cut and eat. You don't peel it off, and it's delicious.
Yeah.
So that's what I did.
And then again, the artistic look of it.
Then after you do that, then you affix your artwork to it. So first you bake the cake, you fill the cake, you ice the cake, you structure your cake, or you carve it and ice it if you want it to have a shape. And then you decorate it. And the decorations are made in advance so that you can do a cake in 24 hours.
And this was, I guess, new in America at the time?
Nobody did it.
How did you even think of doing that? Where did you get that inspiration to even do that?
I didn't see why you couldn't do a good wedding cake. I didn't understand why they had to be dry. I don't see why you can't have a delicious chocolate cake iced in white buttercream and put flowers on it, and then you have something to look at and something to eat. And I want both. I want the combination of the visual as well as something to eat that's delicious.
Maybe it's obvious, but I want to know from your perspective, why a wedding cake? When you got that idea, when you thought, why can't I do both? What is it that came to you thinking that I'm going to do it in terms of a wedding cake?
Well, I think the first cakes were not wedding cakes. They were individual, like a 10-inch round cake with pretty flowers for a dinner party. And then someone said, could you do a wedding cake? So I did a little 3-tiered cake that became a wedding cake. And from there, they became 10 tiers and 12 tiers as the word got out.
So this woman who came by the window, and then you said she ordered like 4 cakes or something. What was it that you said?
No, she ordered 1 cake. She introduced me to the caterer. I got to meet Donald Bruce White, who had at that time the ladies as his clientele.
Like anyone in particular?
Well, you just name them, the ladies at lunch. That's an era of the 80s.
Society women.
So I do believe one of the society women, who I don't really remember, brought a cake into the Carlisle Hotel. And at that time, the banquet manager was a woman called Ruth Traeger, and she started to order. So whether it was a dinner party cake or a wedding cake or a social occasion cake, as soon as that came out, then the Pierre and the Plaza and the other hotels all jumped on board. And I was off and running. I had a business.
In terms of what they wanted, I mean, it's almost like back in the commissioning a painting, I suppose, right? They would say to you, hey, we'd like this kind of a thing. Like, what would they say to you in terms of what they want? Or would they give you just carte blanche?
Well, they didn't know what they wanted.
Because they didn't know, because it hadn't been done.
Right. So what you had to do is pull out the information. So that's how we started with our palette plate, where we have samples of different fillings and samples of little cake, which they could taste, and they could help design what they wanted to serve their guests.
As far as taste. And then what about the visuals?
Then in terms of visual, I would say, well, who's doing the decor? Well, first of all, you want to know what hotel they're in. If they're in an Asian hotel like the Mandarin, it's one look. If they're in the ballroom at the Plaza, it's another look. You don't do a hoedown country look in the Plaza Hotel.
Yeah.
You do that in either an open space or a barn, weddings in barns, weddings in lofts, where you can design the exterior as well as the interior. So you find out where they're doing it, and then you find out what the dress looks like. Is there a pattern on the dress that you would like to carry on to the cake? Is there a pattern in the invitation that they like so much? Is there a crest? Is there a monogram? You get an idea of the taste of the client, or what do they like? You'll find certain ethnic groups like a certain look. The Asians like something very simple. In Japan, it's very clean. They can take one flower in a vase and make it beautiful. But then we have the Italians or the Russians or the Jews. More is better.
And what I would say back, at the time when you first were bringing this idea out, I'm imagining that when the wedding cakes that were being made at the time, and pastries and other things, they weren't necessarily thinking so much of tying in decor and people's personality and that, right? I mean, was that also something new?
Well, I think there was standard looks. A wedding cake at that time was
like
white,
package A, package B,
yeah,
package
it was a white
C,
cake with sometimes,
and maybe a bride and groom on top of it, right?
With a plastic bride and groom.
Yeah.
It's very commercial. Or they would put fresh flowers on. And my attitude was, all these flowers are coming through the Department of Agriculture and they are sprayed for insecticides. So why would you want to put a flower that's sprayed with insecticides into the cake you're eating? Oh my God,
who would think of that? Okay.
Well, a lot of people did. So that was one of my selling points.
Interesting. And of course, in today's terminology, it's like branding, quote unquote.
At this point now, a Sylvia Weinstock cake is a brand.
Yeah.
But you work very hard. It's sort of like Hermes. You know the brand. You know what it stands for. You know it's limited in supply. You can't go and get 25 of the same one at the same time. So that you take it by order. And sometimes the color is different for you. So, you work with the interior designer for the event. The florist is very important because they will tell you what the decor is, what the colors of the room would be, which doesn't always mean that you're going to do that. A girl might want all red flowers, but she wants a white wedding cake. Or she has all white flowers in the room and she wants the cake to have color.
When the brides do that, or the bride's mothers, when they're saying to you, my vision is red and this and that, and you're still looking at the whole, let's call it the palette of everything. How would you deal with that with them?
They are the client. I will deal with their vision. And as much as possible, I'm there just to execute. I don't dictate. I can steer very carefully and very gently in another direction, but it is basically their event. And you're interpreting their thoughts into reality.
Okay, so going back, when this started to happen, and did you say you're at the Carlisle, and then you start getting calls elsewhere? We're also talking about building a business. How were you able, because obviously you built a tremendous, the business of business. How did you know about that? How did you figure out, because that's a whole nother thing, right? An artist, like I can relate most to music. There are unbelievably wonderful musicians, songwriters out there who do not know how to then deal with the business side, and no one ever finds out about them. How did you deal with that part of it?
I think you're lucky. I think, number one, you've got a lot of elements going for you. At the time I came into Manhattan, people wanted something different and they had the money. The economy was very good. Number 2, I was a new kid on the block with a new look. And I was recommended by the one before. We always went with word of mouth. So that someone said, I went to that wedding. That cake was not only beautiful, but it was so delicious. And I have brides even today who will tell me 10 years ago or 15 years ago, your cake was so delicious. I can still taste it.
Yeah, I get that. But still, how did you know how to set up a business, how to set up the way it's going to be delivered, how to hire and manage people, and how to have your vision?
I never did learn how to manage people. And in terms of delivery, Ben and I would deliver at that time until we could find somebody that we trusted who would do the delivery.
And I guess they would tell you how they're going to do it so that the cake doesn't fall apart, so that stays fresh.
We set up that. We knew that the cake would be fresh. We knew that it had to be on a sturdy table. We knew that it had to be cut out of the box a certain way so that it's placed safely.
So you kind of instructed the shippers how to do it.
Yes. Well, shippers, I was a major shipper. I went with a lot of these cakes. So I was there.
You yourself, yeah.
In the beginning,
well, of course,
absolutely.
Right. Okay.
So then, and as staff grew, I had people that learned to do it with me.
And just while we're there for a moment, what about flying cakes? I mean, I know you've had at the top end. I mean, I read one where there was like a 6-foot high, $70,000 cake. My God, how do you, and you have stuff going overseas. How do you do that? How do you ship a cake?
Well, first of all, you deal with a very reputable company. When you go overseas, you have a lot of paperwork and you have to list the ingredients. You have to work through the Department of Health, the Department of Agriculture, etc.
Oh my God. I didn't even think of that.
You hire international shippers.
Yeah.
And they come. We put them in our regular box the way we would send it if it was going around the corner. They then take that regular box and build crates, wooden crates. And the wooden crates are what the international shipper takes. They take it to the airport. They arrange to put it in the cargo body of the plane. They arrange to take it off. They arrange customs on the other end. And they arrange a delivery service on the other end to bring it. And that costs anywhere from $8,000 to $20,000.
Wow.
So you have to be dealing with a very special client.
Do you have any stories of you must have had incidents where there were problems and something happened to the cake, it got damaged?
No.
Never?
No.
In all those years?
No. There's one cake went to somebody in Florida once. There was a snowstorm. The plane was delayed. It was a small cake and they never got it. But that was an act of God thing. And they were very,
they understood.
Of course, who could help them?
Sure.
Nothing. But, on international, there's always somebody that goes with it.
Oh, they travel with it. Well,
they travel on the same plane or they meet the cake there.
Yeah.
Or we had a one cake, for instance, that left New York and went directly to Rome. From Rome, it went down to Naples. It was trucked. It couldn't get into Naples with customs. It went to Rome. So they drove it from Rome to Naples. From Naples, it went on a boat to an island. Let me see if I can remember the name of the island. And then once it landed on the island, it was trucked to the site of the wedding. And I flew directly to Naples, took the boat, and arrived just about the same time that the cake arrived. Geez.
Wow. So, okay. So you're building this business. You're getting orders internationally. You're getting tons and tons of press. Along the way, you've also been meeting some fascinating people, right? From celebrities, actors, actresses, politicians, finance people. I mean, what has that
regular people. And I always say that every bride that walks through the door is a princess to her family.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Well, I think, you get, a young woman. Most of them today are not as young as I was when I married at the age of 19.
Oh my
Today,
God.
they're in their late 20s or early 30s. every bride is very special to her family and to herself. And it doesn't matter whether she's an actress or a singer or a real estate mogul. It doesn't matter at all. This is an event that everybody shares with on the same emotional level, we hope.
Yeah. And I understand that's, of course, your perspective on each person. It doesn't matter who they are. And I get the impression, though, that like meeting the Clintons, meeting the Kennedys, actors, actresses, it's like almost, again, I understand for what you're doing that it doesn't matter, but just your personal life of meeting these people, it seems to me it's probably really no big deal to you, right? You're just your own personal perspective on it.
After a while,
you just get used to it? Or?
I'm not a star gazer.
Yeah.
I know that people have particular talents. Would I like to spend an evening with Albert Einstein? I don't think we'd have much to talk about. I don't know much about relativity.
But he played the violin. You love classical music.
I love classical music, so he wouldn't talk to me. I would just listen to the music. And there are people who play the violin better than he does.
Hey, by the way, when you say Einstein, the first thing I think of is how I love this saying. He said, reality is merely an illusion.
Yes, this is true.
I love that.
But, and we live with illusion all the time. But, when we talk about celebrations, and weddings, birthdays, that mark periods in people's lives, you're feeding into a fantasy, and it's not really reality. Reality is a daily choice.
Yeah,
but we need that fantasy.
Yes.
Movies have created that for us. Disney certainly has created that.
Yeah,
and people need that because life itself is not always so exciting. If you take a look at the reason why people wear makeup, the women wear makeup, lipstick, get their hair done, this is to create an illusion.
Yeah.
Why do we cover our skin? The beauty industry, the scent, perfumes.
Yeah.
All of these a woman enters a room and her perfume greets her there. And when she walks out, it remains in the room. Yeah. So we all live with illusions of some kind or of another. We go to theater to live through it. We read books and we're a participant in the book in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's, we live a life of voyeurism in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably part of what's happened to the public when they would look at these magazines of movie stars and they listen to their married lives and their problems with their boyfriends and
and they get sucked into it.
Well, because we live in that sort of whether there for the grace of God go I or I'm judgmental. I live next door to Mariah Carey. And when Mariah Carey's in town, aside from the fact that there's a lineup of black limos waiting to escort her wherever she's going.
And her entourage.
But we have photographers lining the streets. Oh,
jeez.
Standing there waiting to get a picture of her.
Yeah.
But they make a living from it. But the others that stand around, the kids that stand around, and there was a singer that lived around the corner down the street. I forget her name because it's not my generation. Someone recent. If you can think of it.
Oh, there's so many, yeah.
I was walking down the street and I saw about 7 young women, anywhere from 17 to 20 maybe, standing out there. And I said, what's happening? Oh, so-and-so lives here. So they're going to stand there in a cold day, waiting to get
just to get a glimpse of someone who happens to be, they're gifted, but they're on TV. And so it's a phenomena I don't quite understand. I think it addresses this just innate loneliness that we all feel of existence. I think it's just something really basic.
I don't know if it's loneliness. I think it's twofold. One is vicarious living. And the other is judgmental. Because if their boyfriend is beating them up or in their process of divorce, people love to hear that because that's not happening to me. I'm better than that.
I was going to say we're comparing these celebrities' lives and how they are compared to where we're at. And who are they? They may have a talent or not. It's just that they're famous.
Listen, I always said even the Queen uses toilet paper.
Right. So did Albert Einstein, I think.
I think everybody hopefully did. So I'm just saying that we're all human beings. We're here for a period of time. And every once in a while you get someone who's so impressed with themselves. I would say, the pyramids in Egypt were built many, many years ago. Can you name one person who worked on the job?
Yeah, right.
There were probably 10,000s of slaves.
Slaves, yeah.
And in the process of time, nobody knows who they are. And in the process of time, perhaps not too many people will know who you are.
In terms of time, and all of that, how has it been for you, doing this business, as a woman and also aging, dealing with aging through business, through the industry, well, I think as a woman in the beginning, I was not taken seriously. I was entering a world of French men. Because at that time, the really good bakeries were mostly French. Yeah.
And although they learned how to cook from their mothers, they never accepted women in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I do remember we once did a wedding cake in France, and I went there to do it there. And I was allowed to do it in the hotel kitchen. And it was staffed by all French men. And I was given a corner in which to work. Well, they didn't have any of the equipment we needed. They didn't have a cake table that I could rotate a cake onto ice. So we had to take a bowl and turn it upside down, and Ben turned it while I iced. Oh my God. I mean, it was so primitive.
But you're saying had you been a man, they would have let you into a different part of the kitchen?
If I had been a man, they would have welcomed me. But when we were all finished, and they used to look askance at me, to see what was doing. When we were finished and they saw the end result, and I had made an extra one for them to taste.
Oh, brilliant.
They brought out a bottle of champagne and they saluted me.
Oh my God.
I will always remember that.
Yeah.
It was one of the great honors.
Wow. That's great.
One of the great honors. So obviously if you're good at what you do, and if you're humble, that's another thing. Don't come in knowing everything. Come in you're on somebody else's turf. Same thing with delivering a cake to a wedding venue. You're not the guest. You're a worker. And when you go to a hotel or to a country club, that's somebody else's turf. You're there just to do a job. Yeah. So, people that are pretentious and are very full of themselves are not really very well liked or respected. And in time, they will learn a very hard lesson.
Yeah. So, and what about just the way you've gone so many years, decades? I mean, in a moment, I want to come to, what's going on currently, but just, did you just not think about that? I mean, I personally don't think of quote unquote retirement. If I love what I'm doing, if I'm passionate, I want to be involved. I don't know what retirement. I don't think about age.
What does retirement mean? To me, you change a direction. I haven't retired. I will retire when I am cremated and dusted.
I was going to say, yeah.
That's retired.
Yep.
But as long as I'm able to function, I will find something challenging, something exciting, something that contributes in some way, and then we can talk about that. But in the meantime, you look at it on a daily basis, and you look at the jobs that you have to do, and you never really think of time. I can't believe that there was an article about one of the Trump kids who was married 15 years ago at Mar-a-Lago. I can't believe that I delivered that cake 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I had lunch the other day at one of the stores on the Upper East Side, and a young woman came over and said, "You did my cake 15 years ago."
Yeah.
I said, "Are you still married?" She said, "Yes, and we're happily married."
Right.
And I said to her, "It's too bad. I love repeat customers."
That's great. And I'll bet you've had some.
Oh, I've done the third wedding too. For the same bride.
That's all different definition of repeat business. So coming along, we're talking about changes, and I know that we got together. We had a great meal a year ago, and we started to talk about how you were thinking about closing the offices and doing this licensing. So I come here to the building. I didn't know yet it changed, and I find that the offices are closed. What was the process of that? That must have been huge, right? You've been doing this for 35 years. What brought you to make that decision, first of all, and then what you're doing next?
Well, there was an impetus that happened. I had a young man working for me who was dishonest. So we have a court case going on that one. And looking forward, I saw a very quiet January and February and felt that I would be in deep trouble maintaining my staff and paying my bills after what this young man had.
Oh, wow. Was that bad?
Stolen.
Huh? Oh, God.
Yes.
Yeah. I had this too, an embezzlement situation. But anyway,
we can talk about that. But so it and my husband's not well. He's 92. I don't know whether you want to call it senility or Alzheimer's or whatever word they have for it. But since he's 92, you do say to yourself, how many years do we have together?
Yeah.
We are married 68 years.
Incredible. And I had the pleasure of meeting him, talking to him, years ago.
You could
and
probably still
the relationship
talk to him,
you
but he won't remember anything.
Yeah.
He will, if we have company on a Friday night, Saturday morning, I'll say, did you enjoy it? He enjoy what? Do you remember so-and-so was here? No. He will read the newspaper and read the same article over and over again. It doesn't register. And if I read it to him and want to discuss it with him, he might for the moment, but it doesn't, the mind is not retaining anything.
I mean, Sylvia, what answer really is there? How are you dealing with this after 68 years? How do you live with this?
I think you deal with it the best way you can. It's sad to see this, but he's still here.
Yeah.
And, we now have an aide who comes in a couple of hours every day to relieve me and to help me with the things like shaving and washing and changing, etc.
Sure.
But, he's a sweet man, and he always was. He's not depressed. He's not angry. He's not frustrated. I don't think he's even aware of it. Every once in a while, he'll say, I'm an old man. I said, thank God. But one needs a sense of humor to get through life.
Yeah.
And if you really took everything to heart, you'd probably commit suicide.
Sure.
Because you read about the killings and the murders and the wars. And we won't even talk about politics, but just in general, life is not a smooth run. So you look each day for something that gives you some joy. It's there if you look for it.
Yeah.
Every day will give you something, whether it's walking down the street and somebody smiles, or some kid says, I love your eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Or they say, I love your frames, lady. Or there's always some little something that will happen that can give you a little bit of an inner chuckle if you're open.
If you're open, yes.
If you're open.
I agree.
And that's the answer to probably a joyous life. Is to be open and to accept a lot of things, minor foibles. I'm not saying that I'm inviting a murderer to dinner, but I mean, everybody has a little bit of a something. So if you can accept a lot of that.
Oh, and be amused in a sense.
Yeah. And deal with it or shuck it off or, whatever. But you can find humor in a great deal.
It's interesting. I'm in my upper 50s, and only recently have I been able to fully really what you're talking about is be open and just, I am so much more content and happy. It took me so long to get there because I was so insanely driven. Driven.
And the other statement.
And in this industry.
Yeah. But the other thing is the word judgmental. So people say don't be judgmental, but I think you have to be judgmental in a sense. You have to know what's right and wrong. And you have to know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So within that kind of a framework of decency, you are judgmental.
I think it's just natural.
Well, some people are judgmental in so many ways in a negative way. For instance, you're having a wedding for 300 guests. Everyone should come with a full heart and happy for this couple.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, I don't like where they put me at the table. I think the band was too loud. Did you see the way she looked at him? Did you see this? They see that? One of those critical people who's so judgmental in a negative way about everything. And you have that. You see it.
Yeah.
And I have said to many people who cannot afford my cake, and it's just a quick interview on the phone.
Yep.
I always tell them, one of the nicest weddings I ever went to were 2 kids where there was hamburgers and hot dogs. They paid for it themselves.
Yeah.
And there was no band.
Right.
We just sat around and talked and drank beer because they couldn't afford hard liquor.
Uh-huh.
And they're happily married and they've got 3 or 4 kids. And it's in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah, what a great lesson.
It's in the eyes of the beholder. And you can go to that fancy wedding that cost $1 million and a year later they're divorced.
Yeah, right, of course.
So you tell me where it's all at. It's all in how you perceive life.
Yeah. So how are you perceiving it now? You've closed down your offices. You're doing licensing. Can you say a little bit more about where you're at in your life with your career now?
Oh, absolutely. I'm having a great deal of fun. First of all, I closed down the business. So we're packing stuff up, giving some stuff away, doing some charity stuff with things, etc. I'm emptying out the 2 floors. I will keep a lot of mementos because I do have an agenda.
Okay.
So all the sketches that we did for cakes, etc., I may do a book. And a book with memories, a book
Sylvia,
with thoughts.
People would love that.
Yes, I think that would be a winner. And so that's one thing. Then I would like to sell this building that I'm in and move to an apartment because at this point in time, I can't change the light bulbs.
Yeah.
Nor can my husband.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take the garbage out. I want to put in an incinerator down the hall.
You're saying you've been doing this up until yesterday?
I've been doing all of this. And,
Okay.
and I just want the luxury of a doorman. So I would like to stay in Tribeca because I love this neighborhood.
Yeah.
So if I can get the price I would like for this building, I will move to an apartment. And I'll put the rest away to live on. And licensing in the beginning is a very slow start. So we now have a license in Kuwait, and it's a very slow start to get the royalties.
Can we define what licensing is in your business?
Licensing and franchise are 2 different things. A franchise is when you deliver the ingredients or the product or parts of the product to the site. McDonald's, some of them are a franchise.
Yeah.
A license is when you get a royalty, a certain amount of money up front, and you teach them to do what you do. So you teach them to bake, fill, ice, make sugar flowers, infrastructure. You teach them how to sell. Now, that's a license, and you get a percentage every year of the product that they sell with your name on it.
Okay.
Now,
in perpetuity. Or is there a certain amount of years where it ends?
No, I don't think so. I think it gets renewable.
Yeah.
It gets renewable.
Yeah.
It's like I went to the ear doctor the other day for just a minor checkup, and they said they'll give me a remind next year. I said, how about 10 years? Can you give me a remind for the next 10 years? He said, madam, we don't do that. I said, that's too bad. I would look forward to being here in 10 years from now. But that's a license. So Japan, you have to be particularly sensitive to the country you go to. For instance, in Kuwait, you're not allowed to have alcohol. Therefore, their desserts are very sweet. And they do major dessert tables.
Oh, right.
They love desserts.
Wow.
And if you go to Japan, where they can have liquor, and the Japanese do not like too much sugar, so their cakes are not as sweet.
Yeah.
And they use a lot of fresh fruit, and they use whipped cream. And And they use green tea and they use kumquats. And interestingly enough, they use figs as a filling. They like figs. Whereas you couldn't sell a fig filling in New York.
I'd love to try it. So you're having to research.
So you know the
first.
Country.
Yeah.
No, you get to eat the food.
Okay.
I have always admired the Japanese in many ways for their sense of their commitment towards perfection. They are minimalist in many ways. They never overplate food, like going to Texas where the ribs are hanging off the plate. And it's a 12-inch round plate.
Hey, you don't see a lot of overweight Japanese, do you?
Never. They eat, their big diet is fish. Yeah. And they don't fry a lot of stuff. So, and their plates may be small, but the portions are even smaller. Yeah. But they'll do multiple portions. Yeah. The only thing is everything that they do is very refined. And, I mean, I did get over the fact that they bombed Pearl Harbor, but, the Japanese that I have gotten to meet have been extremely sensitive, extremely talented, and dedicated to perfection. Yeah. So you're personally traveling, obviously, yourself. How long are you staying for weeks or? No, you stay for about 10 days.
That's it. Wow.
Well, they're all set. This particular company in Japan has 80 stores. So they're well established. Wow. They have factories so that I'm just augmenting what they already know how to do.
You must have been offered these deals before. Were you just turning them down?
I was offered a number of deals that were not comfortable.
It wasn't so much about just keeping your value up here?
No, it was, you go to getting married. You're getting married to a new partner. So, you don't necessarily have a trial period.
Well, and I guess you also didn't have as much energy and time to devote, whereas now.
Well, now I have the time and now I have the energy. And now we're thinking in terms of a possibility in China.
Wow.
I've never been to China, so I'm interested in doing that.
Oh my God. How do you have so much energy still? I don't get it.
It's mental. The energy, I think, well, at 5 o'clock or sometimes earlier, I'll have a vodka drink. I think the energy comes from the fact that life is exciting.
See, this is what I really love to hear about, that after all these years, decades, work, that you feel so excited.
I'm very excited about what could
you said you're having fun. You would think it would be depressing, closing things down.
I have designed a kitchen in my next abode. Yeah. A kitchen. I would like to invite 3 or 4 kids from the age of 8 to 12 to cook with me once a week. I might write about it. I might film it.
And what about that?
I just think kids today are learning to make a frittata, are learning how to do a roast chicken, learning how to eat vegetables and fruits. Yeah. And I think it'd be, I did it for, one of my clients and friend had a little girl that came to visit with me and watched me. And she said, can I do some of that too? And she was so excited. I had a friend of mine who has a boy called Daniel. You probably know this woman, Janet from the Rainbow Room. Well, Daniel came and we were going to have lunch, but I waited for him and we chopped the vegetables. We beat up the eggs. We made a frittata. Wow. This kid was so excited. Yeah. Of the prospect of doing this with me that it gave me the idea as an old school teacher that I would do this with youngsters.
Listen, I'm taking out the option to produce this show. I think you might have a reality show. You might
be able to do that. I'll tell you who inspired me in a sense. I had a midday Sunday lunch dinner at Lydia's Basanovich's house in Queens. She started doing it in her house kitchen.
Wow. Interesting.
But she did it for more complicated foods. I would keep it on a level for young people.
Yeah. So you're thinking of doing that. You're doing the licensing. You're traveling to train people. I want to write a book. And you're going to write with your, in a sense, a memoir in a sense.
Well, yes. Well, memoirs are funny because you're supposed to name names, and I will.
And it's not
do
about that, but it's not about that for
No,
you.
it's probably a book on life, on a vision of how you think life should be for most people. How one gets up in the morning and looks forward to a productive day with a little pleasure and joy or a giggle.
Yeah.
One who surrounds themselves with friends. I mean, I entertain here about once or twice a week at night. I do the cooking myself. I do the cleaning up. I get my friends to help me. My guests will help me.
Yeah.
I had Jacques Torres and his wife and the baby here the other day. He helped cut up the chicken. She helped stack the dishes.
This is great. That's a reality show too.
But I mean, that's the pleasure of home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to have a home, and I want to do a big open kitchen so I don't have this wall.
Yeah.
So that we can
Yeah, and you
talk
can
and
socialize
cook
while you're doing it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
this
had
sounds
that up
wonderful.
in the country house, and I liked it. It works for me.
Yeah.
Since I don't, so someone said, but what about the pots in the sink and whatnot? I said, I work very tidy, very clean, so that by the time you sit down, the kitchen's tidy.
Yeah.
But, you know, I just think that we're losing out on this, especially in New York. Nobody cooks. They eat out all the time. And, they go to bars all the time. These young people who really don't have very much money, nobody makes cooperative suppers.
Yes.
They go to a bar, they buy one drink, which they nurse for the evening because of salary restrictions. And I see that. And I think even families, we've dispersed around the country and around the world. I've insisted that Thanksgiving, I don't care where you are in the world, we come for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I've picked a holiday that we could all
You're talking
be
about
with.
family?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a grandson in North Carolina. I've got a granddaughter up in Boston. I had one in Chicago. Parents are scattered. So you say we have to have something that binds us.
Yeah. Well, and also in today's world, modern world, with all the, oh my God, everyone's on the phone, the social media. I mean.
Oh, I restrict that. I do not go to dinner or lunch with the phone.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I did once meet a couple of editors of magazines, and we went to one of the restaurants uptown.
Yeah.
And they were all on their phone, and I said, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I said,
good
where are you
for
going?
Good for you.
I said, well, I came all the way up here to spend time lunch with you.
Yeah.
And you're all texting
I
under
am
the table.
so glad
and talking.
you said that. Yeah.
And I said, either we're lunching or we're not lunching.
By the way, I got to check my phone for a moment. No, I completely agree with that. Wow, Sylvia, I love hearing the story. I mean, again, I've been fortunate to be here many times before over the years and see the company, see the different floors and everyone working, you know, on the cakes and everything. And to see this next phase of your life, it's inspiring.
It was time. It was time in many ways too, Andy, because although I was like number one on the street and probably still are in memory, but there are a lot of young people who are now imitators. And, it's unfortunate that many of them cannot be creative on their own, that they have to copy from somebody else's work. That's the beauty of being the first one on the block.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
So now the challenge will be for them to be original. And that's very hard because I do get to see some of the magazines and I get to see what's out there. And I see fondant on most of the cakes.
See what? What is that?
Fondant, which is a sugar coating that you can buy, roll it out commercially and put it on top of a cake.
Yeah.
Which I don't approve of. I never used it. I don't want to eat it. For me, to do just a decorative cake would be like doing a window display item. I understand. You're going to put it in a window and it can be there for 2 months.
Yeah.
But a cake is food and I'm a food person. And I believe in having a delicious, balanced diet. And that includes a delicious cake.
Yeah.
So, even at home, we would have a salad. We would have a starch, green vegetable, I have a grandson coming for dinner tonight, so I'm going to give him a steak.
Yeah.
Because it's a boy.
Right.
And he would like that. We're going to have baked sweet potatoes, fresh string beans, a big green salad.
Yeah.
I have watermelons, strawberries, and ice cream for dessert.
Sounds wonderful.
That's healthy.
Yeah. Listen, if by chance you ever feel like inviting me, I just want to say, I'll make it happen.
You'll make it happen. Wherever you are in the world, you'll manage to get here.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, that will be an invitation for you.
Well, thank you. This has been really a blast, Sylvia. Thank you so much. I love hanging out with you.
Well, it's sort of like we've had a luncheon party without the lunch.
And we're about to go have lunch.
And we're about to have lunch. There was somebody called Andre's Dinner. Do you remember a movie?
Oh, yeah. Dinner with Andre. I love that. That was with Wally, Shawn, and Andre. Yeah. I'm forgetting his last name. I love that.
It was Conversations Over Dinner.
Yes. Have you seen it?
Yes, a long time ago.
I've seen it I've seen it. You know what? I recommend. I saw it when I was like 20 or something. And then I saw it at 30. And then I saw it, at different times in my life. And each time I loved it and got different things from it. I love that movie.
Well, it's like rereading a classic.
And and Babette's Feast, if I'm saying that correctly.
I love that one too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, food now has become very voguish, by the way. We have lots of television shows where you're given 10 minutes to create something spectacular, which I think is a terrible thing. I have tweeted, interestingly enough, some negative comments. I find some of the women wearing nail polish and jewelry and long hair.
Okay, I get the hair, but what's the issue with the polish? Just that anything could come off? Yeah.
You should not be wearing nail polish and jewelry, which catches germs, etc. on your fingers.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be handling food, take that all off.
Yeah.
Now, the other day, there was something on a program where she had bright red nail polish and she's cutting away at the onions or whatever it was. Well, a piece of nail polish could very easily get into the food. So that's why we have health rules.
Yeah. Hey, listen, how do you know the polish won't add a nice little taste to it?
But I really feel that when you're in the kitchen, you adhere to the safety, health, and appearance rules.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. What a blast. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Sylvia Weinstock. Be sure to check out her website at sylviaweinstock.com. It'll also be in the show notes at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And we would love for you to share this episode with your friends and colleagues. As you know, it was such a special conversation. We'd love for everybody to hear it. And be sure to listen to the next level that follows this with my co-host of today, Sean Lowe. And thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.